Good evening, everybody. My name's Ian Fish. I'm the chair of the ISSG, for those that don't know me. And I've pulled together this evening's session, and I hope it'll be of interest to you. Now, we're going to run with everybody muted and preferably with most people with their cameras off. But later on, what I'd like you to do is, if you have any questions that you want to make or any remarks that you want to make, rather than sort of interrupting, although there is a hands up if there's a hands up under reactions, if there's something that's really burning and you feel needs doing at the time. But otherwise, if you just put your questions into chat, and I will then call you at the end after doing a bit of sorting as to what might be, because there's likely to be the same sort of questions from more than one person. So I'll call people in to talk and ask those questions at the end. So my, what was I going to say? Yes, so I hope that a number of you are members of the ISSG. If you're not, and you're members of the BCS, then you should be members of the ISSG. It is the largest specialist group in the BCS. There are larger branches, but it is the largest specialist group. And it really should have almost everybody in the BCS in it, if at all possible. Because although it's called a specialist group, it's not a specialist group for information security professionals. It's a specialist group about information security for all IT professionals. So that's my little advert for our group. And of course, if you're not a member of BCS, well, then the question there is why not? But you're very welcome to this presentation. So our speaker tonight is Ian Murphy. Many of you probably have already come across him on LinkedIn in his cyber off venture, and that's mostly what he's going to be talking about today. But he is actually an extremely experienced information security professional for many years, and over both government and non-governmental things, and on both sides of the fence, both working for industry and for the public sector. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over now to Ian for his presentation. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Mr. Fish. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Ian Murphy. I am CEO and founder of CyberOff. I did think at that point, Mr. Fish, you were going to say, if you're not a member of BCS, then what the bloody hell are you doing here? So listen, what I'm going to try and talk to you guys about tonight, I doubt any of it's going to be earth-shattering, right? I doubt any of it's going to be splitting of atoms, but I like to keep things simple, being a bit of a simple person myself. I'm happy to take points throughout the presentation, throughout the discussion. I'd like it to be a discussion. I'd like people to chip in with their thoughts, chip in with their experiences.
In that case, Ian, can I ask if you want to chip in, to put your hand up and I'll call you in?
Perfect. Yeah, because I was going to say, as soon as I share my screen to present and start talking, I probably lose that visibility of who's doing what, or who's asking questions, or who's putting their hand up. But yeah, I don't mind it. It helps it go better. I think, like I said, what I'm trying to do is almost give people a view of the types of things we try and not talk about in security, or not call them out. And like Mr. Fish said, I've been in the security game for about 30 years now, since the very early 90s, when I joined the Ministry of Defence. And I know it doesn't look like, but this is what security does to you. So if there's any of you on the call tonight who are young and fresh, and think again before you're getting into security, because this is what you'll end up looking like. But what I will say about the industry is it's a wonderful industry, it's a wonderful community. I just think sometimes we slightly take ourselves a little bit too seriously, and this is what this presentation's about. So let me share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. hoping you guys can now see that. Just give me a yes, Mr. Fish, if you can see that.
Certainly can.
Super, great stuff. So the idea of, and I've heard it many times throughout the last few years, but even in the earlier days, people are the weakest link. We want people to be human firewalls. We want people to take security a little bit more seriously. And I kind of try and keep saying to people, you have to have a bit of reality here. You have to you have to give people a break. You have to stop trying to make them into some kind of robot cybersecurity expert, because we're all human. And what kicked it off for me really was, I sat down a few months ago, and I just happened to be watching The Hangover 2, just as an illustration. And it's that scene where Phil's on the phone and he's calling back to say, I'm sorry, it happened again. And it struck home really that no matter what we do, we will make mistakes. And I wanted to look into why that happens, what we can do about it, if anything, offer some stories, offer some background for it, look at the way that we can maybe be a bit more cost effective with what we do. Because if anybody's ever seen any of my stuff on LinkedIn or other social media channels, you know I bark at the moon quite a bit, especially when it comes to big security vendors, who charge an inordinate amount of money for a box with blinky lights and failed promises, you know. So I'm trying to bring that bit of realism, that bit of maybe Scouse humour and my background, and maybe let me give you a bit of my background so you understand where I'm coming from. I grew up in Liverpool in the 80s, and I wanted to be a professional footballer, right? Like every kid of my age in Liverpool, no doubt, and across the country. Never quite made that. So I became an engineer, a mechanical engineer. I did a 4-year apprenticeship, and I think what we lose nowadays in society with people coming into our industry is we lose that ability of where kids have spent the best part of their life in a hierarchical nature with their teachers and their parents within society, and then they go into the working life, and they're going into working life 24, 25, having spent all those years in that type of environment, and they're not really sure how to talk to adults or how to converse with their peers. And I think the one thing a mechanical apprenticeship or any apprenticeship back in the 80s did, it took you from being a schoolboy or a school person to an adult almost overnight. And we lose that realism, I think, sometimes in security, because we will all hear about the skills gap, but we all also hear about people who come into security because they've been promised riches and, you know, get your degree and start on 50k, and that just doesn't, or it shouldn't and can't happen for a lot of the individuals, because you've got to do your time, you've got to be able to earn your stripes, you've got to be able to spend that time learning the stuff you need to learn to make you a rounded person. So this is all around the human element, but nowhere will you see me call anyone a human firewall, or nowhere will you see me call anyone the weakest link. If I do refer to anyone as the weakest link, I also talk about the flip side, as that we're the greatest ally in the battle that happens within cybersecurity. And I think I want to introduce some bare facts, really, that I think a lot of us should be well aware of, but maybe we don't think about it too much, or maybe we don't sit down and think, why is that happening? We are carbon-based morons, right? We are human. We're fallible. We make mistakes. Nobody means to do it. Nobody means to score an own goal from the halfway line. Happened to me once. But it happens, right? And I think we have to give ourselves a bit of a break over that, because, and I'll talk about how we fall for cons in a bit as well, but we are still all susceptible to them, because as a society, anthropologically, we want to help people. We want to be of help. We want to be trusted by people, and we want to trust people. It's in our very nature. It's how societies are built. If we didn't have those qualities in our genetic makeup, would have never have wandered off the savannas, would have never have populated the rest of the earth, and voted in some especially special morons quite recently. But we do this stuff, and we keep, politics is a great one, right? I'm not going to be political, but we keep falling for those same promises. The same parties keep promising the same things every election, and we keep falling for them. And it's just a mind-boggling fact that we will, no matter how intelligent you are or how well informed you are, we are all capable of being susceptible to that. Because I don't think common sense is common. We have it said to us all the time that you should know that's common sense. Well, it's only common sense if you do know. It's almost like the questions on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Oh, yeah, of course. The answer's on the tip of my tongue. Well, of course you're going to know the answer when somebody's told it or revealed it. But especially with common sense, people kind of use that as a stick to beat others with. And unless you've been taught those things, unless somebody sat down and spoken to you about them, then it's not common sense. So you need to give yourself, you need to give them a bit of a break, because all of this is our genetics working against us. It's not just the genetic code of trusting and things like that. If you've ever read any of Richard Dawkins' stuff, The Blind Watchmaker and The God Delusion and things like that, he talks about memes, now not, funny cat pictures where people write on it and stuff like that, but the memes that go along with genes and sit alongside that genetic code, where things are passed through generations, certain behaviors that are not eye colors or hair color or those types of things are passed through those generations. So it does kind of work against us. It can work for us, it's not unusual for parents and children and their children and so on to go into the same line of business and to have an aptitude for something similar. So it's not only our one of our greatest things, it's also one of the things that can trip us up as well. So when we think about the carbon-based life form that we are, and the small time we have in the speck of the universe that we've got on Earth, we do need to stop being so hard on ourselves. I think we do need to stop trying to make people feel inferior, and I think, unfortunately, that inferiority side of things, I see it quite a bit in the security industry. We can be, as an industry, quite sneering to other people who are not in our gang, who are not in our industry. And I think that's part of what I try and do with CyberOff. Actually, I try and make it as idiotic as possible, the videos and the awareness and the things we do, to kind of give people a bit of a break, to give them, to stop the seriousness all the time, to maybe have a bit of a chuckle at work, and maybe have a chuckle at me or that type of person who may be in your way. It's why documentaries like The Office work so well, because you're making fun of the boss without the boss really knowing it, right? We've all worked for a boss who thinks they're an entertainer or thinks they're a comedian or things like that. So it's picking out those foibles, and I think when we start being a bit more human about it amongst ourselves, stop trying to be so, and I don't want to use the word corporate, because corporate identity is really important as well, but we start to be less what we think the corporate wants us to be, and more of what we are in our personality, if that makes sense. Because that leads us on to truisms that we face on the internet, and we face it within security. And I'll come to some facts and figures later on about, you know, the human element of this. But we will click on links. Let's get used to that stuff. And all the links that we click on, we will undoubtedly click on a bad one from time to time, or click on a dodgy one from time to time. So they're there to be clicked. And I think, again, I don't think you can castigate teams if, let's say, you're doing a phishing campaign for doing that type of stuff. I think you can say, hey, here's where you may have gone wrong, and why did you click on the link for that, and help them and coach them. But I saw something recently. It was over Christmas, and excuse me, it was over Christmas, and it was GoDaddy. So it was GoDaddy, the web hosting company, and they sent out an email to their people and said, Christmas bonus, blah blah blah. Click on the link. And then for those that clicked on the link, it was a phishing scam. Now, it came from the GoDaddy domain. It was offering them a Christmas bonus, and it was quite obviously clickbait. That wasn't obviously that it was a phishing scam. It wasn't disguised as a phishing scam. And these are the things that I think, when we try and educate people with security, or we try and use new methods, these are the things that people switch off, and they will stop listening, and they will stop learning. And we've got so far down that road of not listening, not learning, because it's boring, it's dull, it's uninteresting, it doesn't speak to them, it's 30 minutes out the life, they're never getting back. It's a compliance-based thing for the organization, that we need to think about how we're using the attention of the people who can ultimately be our best and most cost-effective line of defense, by helping them with their cyber savviness. But the other truism of this is that bad people do as bad people do, right? It doesn't matter whether it's the internet, or whether it's the local community. There's always somebody there who's going to look for the angle, who's going to look for the scam, who's going to look for the way to get around it. There's always people who are going to be more light-fingered than other people. I should know, growing up in Liverpool, but it was all. We made a sitcom out of it, for crying out loud. If people remember, back in the 80s, there was a sitcom called Bread, and it was about Liverpool people stealing stuff and fiddling the dole, as it was called back then, or DWP as it's called now. We made a sitcom about that stuff, and I think it's intriguing when people go, oh well, we've been attacked, or this, somebody's broke in doing this. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, because what you've got is interesting, and I think part of that comes into this final truism, where we don't really care. We don't really care that much about security. We're not, apart from us in the industry, whose job it is to care. The people outside of it, which is more than us, right? We're the minority. Everybody else, the users, the workforce, the teams, the families, the friends, everybody else doesn't really care about it until it happens to them. And it was interesting. There was a documentary on last night. It had Greta Thunberg on it, and she was talking with a scientist. I only caught a glimpse of it. I think it was a Swedish scientist, and he was saying now, too much of this overload of this fear, this doom, this, if you don't solve the planet, we're all going to die and we're all going to burn, and all that type of stuff. It switches people off. You're not engaging them enough, because you're offering them fear all the time. You're offering them fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is how we've sold security for years. And I'm quite willing for somebody to challenge me on this. But, I worked for Symantec for 5 years, where the whole thing was, bad people will be in your network if you don't buy our product. Here's the dangers of SQL Slammer and NIMDA and I Love You viruses. Buy our product. So it was never about the upside of it. It was never about what is the benefit to my business of being more secure. of being able to withstand these types of attacks, of being able to get back on our feet quickly enough. And even now, so that was back in 2000 to 2005 or 2006, nearly 15, 16, 17 years later, we're still having these same conversations because we're not making people care enough about security. And I'll talk a little bit later about how I think we can do that, because I do think organizations have that equation of security awareness wrong. I think they have the equation upside down. I think they want to build an army of security savvy people to protect the business. So it's all about the business. But I think if you turn that on its head and you give your workforce interest and engage and attention grabbing type of information that allows them to help themselves get cyber savvier, and their family and their friends, because part of what kicked this off for me was, I will quite regularly, several times a month, get calls from friends, family, my wife, my son, my father. Is this a scam? I even had one the other week from HMRC. It was a call. I answered the call, not thinking about it, just picked the phone up. Hello, this is HMRC. There has been a warrant out for your arrest. If you do not click 1 and enter your blah, blah, blah. So I knew it was a scam. But even knowing it's a scam doesn't stop your stomach from turning when you hear that stuff. There's a warrant out for your arrest. I mean, nothing could make a Scouser's stomach turn more than hearing there's a warrant out for the arrest. But even with years of experience, you go, oh, hang on. And then you do a little check and you just make sure. But think about the people who don't have that experience, people who don't have that background, people who don't. I had a friend the other day on a WhatsApp group send around a message. There's a WhatsApp thing coming around, and don't accept it, because as soon as you accept it, it empties your bank account. And it had this long list of terrible things it was going to do. And this is the type of thing that people pass from one to another virally across outside of the security realm. And I had to dissect it for them. I had to say that, listen, guys, this is utter bullshit. This isn't how it works. This isn't how it works. It needs some interaction. It needs things to happen. Just by somebody sending it towards you, it doesn't mean that all of that. And I had to talk to them about different elements and try to make it real for them. And another lad on the group who is in IT, said, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about, because most of them don't listen to me most of the time, as friends don't. But it kind of brings us to us, what should or what can we do about this stuff? Is it inevitable? Do we just accept it? Do we hope for the best and plan for the worst? Which is a favourite line from any Jack Reacher fans out there. Or do we keep believing hype? I mean, I still cannot believe that we buy stuff off magic quadrants. I can understand how they're useful to kind of get an idea of what's moving and shaking in certain things. It's called magic, for crying out loud. And people pay to have their stuff in there. Yet we still base some buying decisions on this type of stuff. So is it maybe time to think about something different? Is it maybe time to, and I think actually, so I know a few CISO friends of mine who are doing things and there's lots of other good groups and WhatsApp groups like the CISO Club and stuff like that, where they exchange information and exchange war stories and exchange, but there are still one born every minute, right? Whereas somebody else will fall for that AI magic quadrant nonsense. We're next gen, military grade, AI based, 100% secure, hacker proof. I may have missed some other stuff, but you get the idea. If we're playing bullshit bingo, most of you should have at least the 4 corners by now. I think part of this is Jimmy Carr's there because he's one of my favorite comedians, and he tells a joke. He tells a joke of Scousers and Manx. So he tells the joke. People from Liverpool think people the other end of the M62 from Manchester are a bunch of, and he uses a very unpleasant word. And then he says, whereas people from Manchester think people from Liverpool are a bunch of, and he uses the very same unpleasant word. And the punchline is, if only they knew, meaning, you know, they're all a bunch of, and I think it's part of what I'm trying to get into people's minds within awareness and within security. Actually, we're kind of all in this together, and we're all morons together. There should be no hierarchy in terms of us security, really knowledgeable, you users not so knowledgeable, therefore listen to us. And I think that's where we keep tripping ourselves up. I think that's where we still have, we've got to cross that street, because we are the business that likes to say no. We don't say yes, but we say no. And you can't do that. It's too risky. Whereas we forget we're there to enable businesses mostly, right? We're there to help the business achieve more, to make them more profitable, to make them more attractive on the street because they're more secure. The idea of brakes on a car are not to stop it, they're to stop it safely. The idea of brakes is to allow the car to go faster. So if you can go faster and safely stop, then you've got half a chance, if you take that type of analogy into your business, of doing something decent and actually supporting the business, instead of being the tribe that likes to say no, or the knights that like to say no instead of me. Because we still get that. We still, it pervades that. There are organisations where it doesn't, where it's getting better. But I think every contracting gig I've ever done, and I've worked with Mr. Fish and possibly a few others on the call. Work's a very loose term, by the way. It's don't take that literally. We've had that. We've had that leveled against us time and time again. That we don't. We're not flexible. We're only there to say no, which is why business units go around us, which is why we're not included in the conversations until afterwards, which is why people don't seek permission, they seek forgiveness. So we have to start thinking that way as well. I'm just going to check, Mr. Fish, any hands up, anything like that halfway through?
No, there's no hands up, but there are some chat comments come through. Some people are having a bit of trouble with the sound, but that might be when you sway away from the from your computer a bit.
To stop swaying.
So Chris Sluman says, with the digital divide, we're encouraging everyone to get facilities to be able to access learning, shopping information, etc. But we have no way of training the little old ladies and everyone we're trying to embrace with all the stuff you're talking about. Do you have any views about how we can cross the divide, i.e. the digital divide, but safely? Which is probably what you're going to go on to anyway, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's about grabbing attention, Chris, and it's a really good point. I think a lot of what's out there, and I do it from a specific point of view, right? There's other things out there. So if my humour isn't your bag, then you can find other people who are doing similar things to what I do. But I use my background, and I use my upbringing, and I use my the wit you had to have growing up in the 80s in Liverpool to bring an approach to awareness that so far has not been there. Everything in awareness at the moment is an American accent, is either a cartoon being drawn, or we treat adults like kids by using glove puppets, right? I haven't seen any, apart from some of the restricted intelligence or the inside man stuff, which takes more of a Netflixy, Amazon Prime approach to scenarios and situations. The only thing that I've seen that gets anywhere near what I'm trying to do was the old John Cleese stuff. If people remember the old management videos John Cleese used to do, I'm not comparing myself to John Cleese, by the way. Please don't think I am. But if people remember those old videos, he set up a learning company around management situations and management scenarios where he used humour to build into those scenarios and get people's attention and help them learn better and faster. It was one of the things he then sold for quite some money a few years later. But he was way ahead of the curve on understanding the use of humour, and that's what I do. I use humour and I layer it with different with descriptions of the issues, but different visuals, different layers in there, different images to allow it to sink in. And I'll use things like raps and rhymes, and even though people say I can't sing, yeah, maybe they may have a fair point. But I'm not going on X Factor anytime soon. To help it sink in to people's psyche, to make it more memorable. Because actually I get people coming back to me who's seen some of my stuff 6 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it is, and say, I still remember that rap or that you did as Vanilla Ian. I still remember the tagline to it. Or they'll even come back and say, that last video you did, that bit in it was really hilarious. And we forget, or I forget sometimes, possibly my age, that we put those images in there because we layer so much within the video. And I think, Chris, what you've got to do is you've got to meet the people where they need to be met. Instead of giving them an infographic and saying, hey, here's all you need to know on keeping yourself secure, which NCSC do really great. They do great work on that stuff. But think of some of the other things like that have worked in the past. Green Cross Code Man, Dave Prowse. I mean, he's just passed away, but Green Cross Code. I met him once in San Diego. That's a different story. The Green Cross Code Man, the Charlie Says, the Bobbit and Poppet. I think I can't remember the name of that. But even recently, the Barclay Card, Nick Frost as the superhero and the sidekick. All of that stuff is relevant to people. It makes them remember that stuff. Why do I remember all the lines from The Life of Brian? Because it means something to me, because it resonates with me, because it interests me. It doesn't bore me. I can't remember the security books I read. I can't remember most of the stuff I did to pass my CISSP, because you kind of do it to pass the exam. And that's the problem with compliance. You do this stuff to pass the exam, to get the tick in the box. You're not improving anybody's savviness on it. And that's why I think we need that type of different approach. Now, I get that my approach isn't right for everybody, right? But where I come from and what I'm doing, it's a mix of Billy Connolly, the Monty Python, Morecambe and Wise, Tommy Cooper, Jimmy Carr, Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor. It's all of that, Joan Rivers. It's all of that stuff that formed my personality and my upbringing as a child, that I think can resonate with more of an organization than, say, buying a big awareness campaign that has posters, that has flyers, that has mouse mats, whatever, and nobody paying any attention to it, because you're not grabbing their attention. You're just putting it out there. You need to grab their attention and help them take them through that journey. Does that make sense, Chris?
So Chris is not unmuted at the moment. So
all right, is everybody muted? Sorry, Mr. Fish. We can pick it up afterwards.
Yeah, we can pick it up afterwards. But there's a few other points. When you were talking about clicking on links, some Andrew Stowe said, yes, I clicked on a link to access this lecture. Exactly. And then Rich Lampard, surprisingly to me anyway, said the first online BCS lecture I attended involved clicking on a link which dropped the VTC executable down onto my machine. Hard to think of something that felt more like a phishing attack. So that was an interesting story.
And maybe hands up everybody who's ever had an Excel spreadsheet as part of their security awareness campaign that they've had to download and enable macros on. I mean, if we're not trying to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Well, wait for a minute for that. There are people, I think we've got a few hands going up now. but Dave C has, whoever Dave C is, I'm no doubt he'll introduce himself. I'll unmute him in a minute, and he can ask his question to you or make his comment. So let me just do that. I'm just trying to. Oh, it won't let me. That's interesting.
Does Dave have to unmute himself? Did you have to click?
He has to ask to unmute, I guess. Yeah. Do you want to ask to unmute, Dave?
Yeah, I'll just click that.
I can't get to it. Oh well, I don't know if he puts it in the. Let me just tell you the other things that came into the.
Okay.
Thing. Today out of the blue from PB. This is today out of the blue. My calendar on my iPhone had some weird appointments populated with dodgy links. Never happened before. Thankfully, managed to unsubscribe.
It's an ad where my wife's a business partner of their business. She had the same thing. I think it's an adware thing. You have to go in and unsubscribe from a calendar that's within the settings. So I've seen that.
That's what he did. Yeah, thankfully managed to unsubscribe. Steve Sand said he enjoyed the John Cleese videos too.
Thanks, Steve.
And Paul C. I'm seeing a change in my organization, albeit a slow one, towards recognizing InfoSec and data governance requirements in projects, but it's been a long and bumpy road with still some way to go. And Chris Sluman says, I think you're right on a one-to-one basis, but how do we as an industry, government, NGOs, etc., push to fix the divide without a massive education to go with it?
I think part of that is changing attitudes, Chris. Part of that is about removing sticks from up so-and-sos, because there's so many people who are afraid of offending somebody that, you know, what they're actually worried about is somebody else's emotion that you have no control over. And it's no wonder why we can't get anything done, because I'm not talking about outwardly offending people. If you set out to outlive, you can offend everybody, right? I'm not on about that. I'm on about people going, oh, will somebody like that word? Or will somebody go again? And it's kind of like it just stymies discussion, it stymies thought, it stymies growth, it stymies debate. People use it to shut down debate nowadays. I'm offended and you can't say anything about that. It's like, it's crazy. You know, there's a lot of great, intelligent people out there who have wonderful put downs for people who they say, I'm offended. More intelligent, windswept and interesting than myself anyway. So
the
can you hear me now? It's Dave C. Can you hear me?
Yeah, excellent.
It was a quick question.
Who are you? Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm David Chapman. I'm a security architect.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I was going to ask, it was about the magic quadrant. So I mean, I totally agree with you, and I've seen people where they'll buy the product based it's top right in the magic quadrant. But my view was it was always informal, and it was whoever wined and dined got the top right hand corner. From what you were saying, it is actually a paid thing. Is that correct? You were saying that?
Some of them are. So you can't pay to get into the top right hand corner. They have analysis around it, right? So they do have I think I remember doing one at Symantec, and you had to have a certain amount of revenue, you had to have a certain amount of customers, you had to put those customers up to be interviewed, but you're not going to stick up a customer that's going to tell them you're rubbish, right? And then they'd have to look at the breadth of your services. But it was about it's almost like the dare I say them, the SC awards, right? If you're buying a big table there, you're getting an award that night, right? I've had 3 emails today offering me an industry leaders award for the work I've been doing. They haven't got a clue what work I've been doing. I don't know what I've been doing, but for the measly sum of $1,200, I can be featured in one of the top 10 security leaders of 2021. It's like, and actually for me, Dave, having industry reviews can be helpful only if they're unbiased, right? The only things that ever really mattered to me from an awards point of view was when I was playing football, was the Supporters Award and the Players Player of the Year Award. Every other award I couldn't give a jot about, didn't care. They were the two that meant the most, because they're voted for by not only your peers, but by the people who paid to come and watch you. Those poor people that paid to come and watch me, which means more than somebody who has a marketing budget to fill. And if that marketing budget is kind of spent, they're not turning around saying, buy this marketing and you'll get that award, or you'll get that place in the Magic Quadrant. But without spending anything with them, you are not likely to be featured. Right? You've got to be a purchaser of and not just Magic Quadrants, other types of reviews and other types of awards as well. I just use the Magic Quadrant because it's got the word magic in it, to be quite honest.
No, thanks for that.
Thanks, Dave. I'll meet you again now. So somebody, Paul C, has also just sort of effectively reinforced your point about personal benefits of good behavior. So it's not just about protecting the organization, which I think is a point you made earlier. Yeah. And David Rees, your CTO tells you, can't you just open a port? I won't come after you if you do that, i.e. means I would like you to take the risk so I can get something done quickly.
Just nobody be the intern, right?
Yeah, that's right. Don't be the intern. That's absolutely right. And to come back to Chris Sluman's point, I think you slightly missed it. I think the problem is when you're talking about the digital divide, you're talking about a lot of people who we're trying to, government, etc., are trying to encourage to get online, as it were, using the phrase. And how do you make sure that those people who are really struggling anyway to use modern technology, to use it safely and securely? Do you think there's an approach that can work en masse as these people are forced online?
I think that's a bigger question than this.
I think that was his question, though.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I think it definitely deserves a pint and sitting down and knocking that about for a couple of hours, right? Because there's so much in there to unpack. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to go online. My mother, she used to keep a book of everything, of dates, of birthdays, of passwords, of this, that, and the other, of credit card numbers, and she would never do anything online. I actually, thinking about it, with all of that information in that book, maybe she was a hacker and I just didn't know anything of her dark past. But again, this is part of. I saw somebody do this yesterday on LinkedIn about a password book in WH Smith or whatever it was. They took a photo and put it on and kind of ridiculed it a little bit. And I'm thinking, why would you ridicule that? I understand why you think you can ridicule that, right? But here's that digital divide. For people of a certain age or for people of a certain way, that's a valid way of storing all that data. That's a valid way of storing all that information. And actually, the threat to that book your house being broken into and that book being found and stolen and then everything being gone is a lot less than actually if you're going to start keeping passwords in your Chrome browser, or you're not going to start updating them, or you're going to click on links that people have sent you, or download stuff that you don't really know, or somebody's got in touch with you and said, hey, we found a virus, please click on this link, allow us to log in and we'll fix your PC for you, which has happened to a couple of friends and family of mine previously. So I think it comes back to that snaring attitude again, and we've got to lose it. We've got to be more approachable. We've got to have a kind of face to the general user public. We've got to stop being like the IT crowd. We've got to start being a bit more friendlier. And that only happens with us crossing the street to them. That doesn't happen with them changing their attitude. We're the problem with this. It's not them. And we have to realise that.
Right. So that's it from a few more thank yous and kudos for you, but you don't need that, I know.
You know me well, Mr. Fish.
You can carry on.
The numbers, just to put something around it, the 90% comes from the Commissioner's Office, the Information Commissioner's Office. And actually, people normally in awareness offer that up to say, buy our stuff because humans the problem. I see this as we're failing 90%, or we're failing that 100% of that 90%, because obviously not everything is human based, by not helping them be better. And because the other numbers make it attractive for people to do this. Why wouldn't you want to do this if the damages and all the things that are stolen and the cleanup work and all that is set to top $6 trillion, which is, you know, a little no change out of 5 trillion quid. Who wouldn't want a piece of that? If you can be sat in your bedroom somewhere doing something, you know, harvesting all this information and getting paid for it. And then when we're spending less than 20% to secure ourselves against that, does that seem a valid risk approach? You know, maybe some of the CISOs, I know Steve's on the call, maybe some of the CISOs at the end can comment on that, but to spend, and I know probably CISOs are struggling for budget anyway, but I would argue probably of that 1 trillion spend, less than 0.1% is spent on the human element of it. I would say a lot of that is spent on the technology, and the technology that's been shown to fail time and time again, without really fully understanding the basics and getting the basics right. You know, who has access to your network, what's connected to your network, not just who. Do they have the right privileges? Have you got rid of old account? You don't need any magic technology for this. You don't need any magic AI for this. And I get older networks. I get servers that can't be touched and stuff. I get all of that. But we initially jump for that silver bullet because, again, it's part of our cognitive biases, right? That's part of the problem that plays in here. The cognitive biases we're all born with allows us to confirm the sales info. We have the confirmation bias, so we're going to see what we want to see, and that's going to be played on by the sales folk. You know, we have the we'll never fall for that bias. These are all the things that play within the con when people get conned. There's a really good book, if you've never read it, it's called The Confidence Game. It's by Maria Konnikova, not Kornikova, that's a tennis player. Maria Konnikova, and it talks about how anybody can fall for the con. It offers stories and backgrounds of the big confidence tricksters throughout history, going back hundreds of years to the snake oil salesman, to the Ponzi schemes, to a guy who was in the US Navy as a doctor, and he'd never done a day's training as a doctor in his life, but he still, and he had a career of it. He went from one con to another, to people in New York who would go and see this soothsayer, and she would relieve them of their money because this was the root of their problems and their issues in their life, but she would keep it safe in a jar for them. And then mysteriously enough, she disappears with all their money. You know, we start then thinking, how would you ever fall for that? That's common sense, isn't it? It wasn't for those people. There's one born every minute. And actually, the studies show within the book that the kind of more intelligent you are, the more learned you are, the more time you spent on your profession doing things. A lot of studies were done against high rate investors. They're part of the easiest people to con because the story is so big. To us, it'd be like, that surely can't be true. That's too good to be true. To them, they deal in that type of stuff every day. So it's easier to play on their needs. And it is about the research of the market. It is about understanding what drives them. It is about making the offer too good to be true. Not everybody will fall for it, but a few people will, you know, and then it is about dragging them in, getting a hook, and then disappearing. And we will all fall for that, and it will keep happening. And I don't think there's a lot you can do about that, apart from learning from experience, apart from increasing the cyber savviness and actually little wins along the way, helping people just pause before they click on links. helping people think, does that seem right? Giving them the little cues. Does that logo look right on there? Does that look like, it looks like the Microsoft logo. It's a bit fuzzy though. Is those little things to start that spidey sense kicking off? Because I think the problem is, and especially when it comes from an awareness point of view, so when you think about the human element, the problem is current content's dull and boring. I'm happy for other people to say, no, it's not, this thing's good, but all the analysis, all the feedback, all the customers I work with, all the other providers that they've worked with, it's dull and boring. There's great, they do great stuff in certain things, the phishing campaigns and stuff like that. But the actual content, they keep going out and buying smaller providers up to make that content interesting for them, because this cartoon drawing thing or this puppet thing just doesn't capture people's imagination, especially here in the UK as well. An American accent does nothing for us. It switches us off, in fact, you know, because when you're delivering complex topics, and Chris, it maybe comes back to that point about the digital divide, we normally think we have to deliver them by experts. Mitnick, we have to have Mitnick do stuff. I'm not questioning whether he's right or wrong, but we have to have a name like Mitnick. Why? Why do we have to have a name like Mitnick? Some of the great stuff done by Restricted Intelligence or the Twist and Shout, who own Restricted Intelligence, don't use any of those folk. You know, they use actors or they use people who are comedians and things like that to communicate. It's about communication, and people should learn that. It's not about here's what a phishing attack is and here's what, it's about communicating that to people. And that's what we miss, because it's that shift in the approach for companies of making the training or the design for the training, making it what's in it for me, for their people, rather than what's in it for the business. Nobody comes to shock horror, CISOs on the phone, on the call, or business leaders on the call. Nobody comes to work to protect your business. They come to work for the pay packet. You know, they'll tell you they come to work to protect it when they're having an annual review, but they don't really care. I'll take you back to my early point. They don't really care. You want to pick up the pay packet. We want to get out of COVID. We want to get back into beer gardens for 90% of people, right? So we have to bear them in mind as the consumer of that content, because then when you start thinking that way, the solution becomes obvious. It's common sense, right? I'm shooting myself in my own feet there. Engaging content delivered in a different way. It actually talks to the user. It entertains them. It gets them on board. Little and often, micro learning. It makes it less formal. It makes it less, you've got to do this, you've got to pass this, and you've got to pass it with an 80% score. Why? Why do you have to pass it with an 80% score? That does nothing for the user. The only thing that does is it shows the auditor, when they come in for the compliance of that security program, that people have passed with an 80% score. Doesn't mean they're not going to click on the links. People will keep going back over if they don't get an 80% score and redoing the questions and re-guessing the questions. They won't go back over and re-look at all the information and take it on board, and then they'll forget it 5 minutes later. Because that's, again, rethinking that training equation. Stop training them for the business. Arm them with advice, arm them with information, communicate it to them properly, where the rubber meets the road for them, their online experiences, and it will help them be safe and secure. So if you can help them in their online experiences, if you can get them talking about it with their families around the dinner table, then that type of training you can't get. You can't buy, you can't pay for. That's priceless. You're getting people engaged in security then. All through from my point of view anyway, all through little tricks like me making a fool of myself on video, dressing in a dressing gown, pretending to have an OnlyFans account. People remember it. You know, it's just, it sounds simple. It's difficult to do. My wife keeps shrugging her shoulders every time she sees a different video, shakes her head, wonders what I do for a living. I wonder what I do for a living, by the way. But you know, it's those little things, and kind of what we are all about is we want to bring lightness into the dullness. You know, we do We have seen it. We've been there. We know it's dull. We know people talk about holistic synergies and all that type of nonsense, you know, where people don't say, would like to work together with you, would like a holistic synergy. What kind of nonsense is that? As a Liverpool fan, you know, Shankly had a great saying. He said, I prefer to say somebody is bloody greedy than say they're avaricious. And that's true. We need to speak to people the way they speak to each other. And it helps it resonate. If you want to check that stuff out, you can find me on LinkedIn. You've seen my picture on LinkedIn. I think I've got a lycra top on and a thing that says POW in the picture. But that's the website. That's my email. Drop me an email if you want to counter any of my points or talk to me about it. I'm available for weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs as well. But I think that's about us, Mr. Fish. I've nearly taken us up to the hour.
Yes, that's thank you. Just a couple more points came in on the chat. Steve Sands, your favorite CISO, whoops, says, picking up on Paul C's point, we publish the Sands Ouch newsletter to everyone each month. It's not usually humorous, but does reinforce good security at a personal level, which translates to thinking about security at work too. I don't know what you feel about that. You're obviously aware of that.
I think, hiya, Steve. I think we're relying on people reading it. You know, I did a contract not so long ago where I was talking to them about this and how you communicate to people, you know, and I asked for a show of hands of how many read the CTO's blog that was emailed to them every Friday. I asked them to be honest. I made sure, you know, there was like 10% read it. You know, people generally don't unless there's something in it for them. What I've seen useful is for those types of newsletters, and I've done it with a couple of customers, to embed the videos in them, because you can then get that message over, but you're doing it because you've embedded a video that somebody goes, oh, this is a bit new. What's this all about? But Steve knows my approach on this.
And then Paul C said Barclays used to produce some very good videos with a comedy irony element. Always thought the approach was really effective, and
really
yet
effective.
more nice things about you again, which I won't read out.
Yes, please don't. Really effective, and like the Paddy Power adverts, really effective, right?
Affected, did you say, or effective?
I'm affected, but they are effective.
Now, I don't know, we've probably got a few minutes. If anybody's got any questions, if they'd like to put their hand up and try and ask to be unmuted, I think we might be able to do it. I didn't find out how to do it before, but somehow it happened. Otherwise, I would just like to thank Ian for what was a very interesting hour, actually, nearly. And I really enjoyed it, and I know some of you did, because it was obvious that you did. And there's lots of thanks. One new message. Excellent.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Who's that? Daniel? No, gone off.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Just somebody crashing the Zoom meeting. You don't have the authority, Mr. Fish. You don't have the authority. I thought I'd say that. I think you've got to say that on every Zoom meeting now, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right.
I think so.
Yeah. And there's Mr. Sluman. He's appeared again. Anyway.
Only because you told me to turn yourself off. No, I think what you were saying, it was brilliant, and I think that Ian Fish managed to reword the question I was trying to really ask, which is, and it's the one you said, it deserves a sit down with a pie and a pint over time. But it really is, how do we take all these, we're trying to take all these people with us into a much more digital age, but we haven't got, as an industry, any way of actually teaching people collectively. And one of the things that it struck me on this is I did some stuff for what was a BCS initiative called IT Can Help. And I was going around visiting little old ladies, people who had issues, but they'd been provided with computing systems so that they could do their shopping, so that they could contact people online. But they were being provided with systems and internet and everything, but they weren't being provided with any kind of insight into what not to do. So my question really was about that. How do we as an industry get over that?
I think part of the response to that is we all want to get over that, but part of the response to that is I don't think we can ever get over that, Chris, because COVID, you've got people knocking on doors, taking 100 quid off old age pensioners and promising them a vaccine. It's just this stuff happens, right? There's horrible people about, and there's.
It doesn't mean we can't do at least go.
I agree.
Some way.
I agree. I agree.
I'm interested in exploring what the some way might be.
Bravery is required. I firmly believe bravery is required, right? And I mean bravery from a point of view where we need to try something different, because we've tried the posters, we've tried the emails, we've tried the don't do that and all that type of stuff, but it kind of doesn't work. I'm still not really a year into CyberOff, to be quite honest, and I only really started trying to push it in January. The rest of the time was building the content library, and I would love as a content production company, I would love to think that there was a way to do something like we're doing, but with Netflix or with Amazon Prime. And this has got nothing to do with my ego, maybe a little bit, but this has got nothing to do with my ego. This has got to do with, I firmly believe that those mediums, my dad has an iPad, right? He watches all the Sky and all that type of stuff on there. But what's wrong with Sky having a bit of an awareness campaign for their users? What's wrong, like Barclays doing with the adverts? What's wrong with other people doing all of that stuff? And it would be great.
I think I agree totally. And I was thinking as you were starting to list things, I'm thinking Sainsbury's and Tesco's, which is where they go for their online shopping, and where people are going for messaging. The sort of. So I'm thinking that perhaps BCS is a good place to coordinate that.
But yeah, I mean that's the whole thing for the BCS, right? For the IT industry and the computer society to kind of spearhead those things. I think that the problem you have with other companies doing it, you've got the cyber, the police cyber force. I forget the name now, but I can introduce you to the head of that guy. Who used to be at CSG once a long time ago and stuff like that. There's a lot of work that those guys are doing. The regional cybersecurity forces, there's great work that you can get involved with those. And I think even dealing with those two things, the cybersecurity forces and this London cyber, they're still mismatching. They haven't got the right. They're not talking to each other in the right way. But almost because someone wants the kudos, then somebody who cares?
Something. I mean, Ian is probably the best.
He's gone.
Oh,
vanished.
Did he click the link?
I don't know. I didn't touch anything. Anyway, I think it is time to wrap this up now, and I'd just like to thank you for a very, very intriguing talk, and I think an awful lot of people enjoyed it. There's thanks coming through in great numbers at the moment, which is good. And hello, somebody's putting their hand up, Maria. And I can't, oh, she's just waving, I think.
Oh, well, that's a Zoom waiting, everyone. It's a Zoom waiting.
Yes, and it's the first, I've never left a meeting room and waved to everybody as I went out, but a physical meeting room, but everybody seems to do it on Zoom. Anyway, strange, isn't it? I think your idea about BCS is interesting. It also, another interesting thing would be how the Cybersecurity Council, when it gets itself really going, whether that takes up anything in this space, and I think it should.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. Is that with Tosh?
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And me.
I know you're there as well.
So I'd just like to thank you ever so much for this. I really enjoyed it. I think most of the others enjoyed it. They know how to get in touch with you, or how to look at your content online if required at your CyberOff thing. So I just hope we can move forward so that the things that Chris was talking about can be done. I think we're talking about baby steps at the moment, individuals, but there are some societal things that need to be done, which are going to be incredibly difficult, and we'll never get there, but that's not a reason for not trying, and at least making things better.
I agree.
So thank you all very much for your attention, and thank you, Ian, for your presentation, and that's it.
Mr. Fish, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thanks everybody. Take care. Stay safe.